Hello guys, and welcome back to the 2023-24 SDPN NHL season previews. Next up, we have the Toronto Maple Leafs, who had a hectic offseason, getting rid of Kyle Dubas, bringing in Brad Treliving, making a ton of changes to the roster. But after their first second-round series appearance since 2004, are they ready to take that bigger next step, getting even farther in the playoffs? Well, we're going to be dissecting every part of this offseason to answer that question and more all throughout this preview. But before we get into that, let's first shout out today's sponsor in Sports Interaction. Get in on the action to make your bet with Sports Interaction. The MLB season getting closer to an end here. Blue Jays still in the thick of it. You can bet before the game or live it and play with all your favorite teams. Head to sportsinteraction.com/SDPN or download the app to get started. 19 plus, and please play responsibly. But folks, this Leafs team is looking fascinating for this next year. With how much they're truly going for, it looks like, at least with potentially William Nylander not being re-signed and only having this next year on his deal and the free agent deals they made. This next year in the Atlantic especially is going to be wacky. Toronto definitely adds to that. When we look at the additions they made though, of course, first up we have Tyler Bertuzzi on the forward group, which is an excellent deal. $5.5 million, even if it is only for 1 year. Having Bertuzzi at that cap hit is amazing for Toronto and exactly the type of signing they needed to make. You can see what he was able to do with the Bruins when he was healthy in the regular season, in the playoffs. This is an amazing top six player who brings that sandpaper that, especially on that top six, the Leafs could always use. You also have Max Domi, who will also bring some of that sandpaper onto the top six. Also a 1 year deal at $3 million. And that's another fantastic deal just in terms of the AAV of what he's able to produce in Dallas. That playmaking style that he brought was unreal. As a Stars fan, absolutely adored him and was so sad to lose him. But at $3 million, you can't complain about that deal. You get really a top line left wing and a second line left wing at $8.5 million. That's not too bad there, especially considering how good these two players are. You also have Ryan Reeves, which is a little bit more of a controversial contract, just a little bit, slightly more controversial. 3 years at $1.35 million. I mean, if we're talking about sandpaper, that is Ryan Reeves and only really Ryan Reeves. He got 15 points, 61 games last year, likely on that fourth line, but don't expect too much offense, really. You also got John Kleinberg, who, if you're going to be expecting anything, expect offense at the very least, hopefully. These last couple of years, I think we've definitely seen a decline in just the overall game, even some of the offense. You can see in the playoffs, though, a point per game, and that's great to see. I think just with Klingberg, though, he is a black hole on top of a black hole defensively, and you're really going to have to shelter him well. We'll see how much Toronto does shelter him, but you can still get some good offense out of him, at least when he is in the offensive zone. But it's going to be pretty brutal outside of that. Then you go on to the subtractions they made this offseason. First, highlighted by Ryan O'Reilly, who unfortunately for the Leafs left in free agency to the Preds. He was awesome in the regular season and the playoffs for them. Just immediately had a major presence on that team that will be lost. You also lose Michael Bunting, who likely will be less of a loss, but still a good goal-scoring presence. 23 goals back-to-back seasons. That will be missed too. You also lose Alexander Kerfoot, who this last year was solid 32 points in 82 games after a 51-point season, but a player that isn't the biggest loss in the world, at least for that middle six, especially with the replacements they've gotten. You lose Justin Hall, who is okay defensively, and he goes to Detroit. He goes to a division rival. We'll see how much that affects things, but I mean, I don't think Toronto was in a position to re-sign him, especially at that cap and that term. And you also lose Luke Shen, who goes on to the Nashville Predators alongside Ryan O'Reilly. Now, there is the case to be made that they might be worse off than they were at the trade deadline this last year, but considering how good Bertuzzi, Domi can be, especially John Klingberg offensively, there's a case to be made that on offense, they are better than they were back then. Now, when we look at this Leafs team and players potentially taking that next step and being big contributors, there's three players that I'm really fascinated to watch this next year. First up, of course, is the main rookie in town, Matthew Knies, who's coming into his first full rookie season and is looking to make a big mark. Now, with Bertuzzi and Domi coming on the left wing, there might be less of an opportunity for Knies, but it'll at least be on that third line, maybe on the power play there, and I think he's going to hit the ground running. In 10 games this last year, with the regular season and playoffs combined, he got 5 points, and to me, this is a player that brings a mature game, already one of the better power forwards on the team, and he's a player that, in terms of the rookies in the league, is absolutely going to be one of the most mature, and I could see around a 40, maybe even 50-point season if everything goes right. If he's given that power play time, maybe he rises up in the lineup. Still, though, even if he's around a 30-point mark, that's still solid for a rookie, and he'll definitely be a major top six contributor in a couple of seasons. Now, going on to the second player to watch on this Leafs team, I would include John Klingberg here if we hadn't already talked about him. But at number two, I'm going to actually include his likely D partner in Jake McCabe. I mean, they could roll Riley and Klingberg if they wanted, but I don't think that's any NHL team's intention. Jake McCabe likely on the left, John Klingberg likely on the right on that middle pair is what I assume will end up happening. But of course, with Jake McCabe, who was acquired by the Leafs this last deadline, defensively did some solid things, wasn't as amazing in the playoffs as maybe the Leafs would have wanted, but he's in a position alongside Klingberg where he has to be amazing defensively, because if you're alongside Klingberg and okay defensively, that pairing is not going to work out. But Jake McCabe has the chops to be great, and I think this next year, in a full season with Toronto, we see him really start to shape in that lineup. Now on to my third player to watch for this Leafs roster, and next up, let's go on to the goaltending here in Joseph Woll, who has burst onto the scene for the Leafs as a third-round pick back in 2016. This last year, though, played 7 NHL games, got a .932 save percentage. In the playoffs, a .915 save percentage as well. Coming in at 25 years old, this is right where a lot of these backup goaltenders start to enter the league. Woll has shown massive promise though so far, and as Samsonov's backup could do pretty well if he's given around 30 games. I would love to see him tackle that sample size and do great in those. But now let's go through grade the forwards, defense, goaltending next up, and this is one of my favorite parts, especially considering the Leafs forward group, and a forward group that has the case made that it has gotten better. Of course, with Knies coming up in his rookie season, but Max Domi and Bertuzzi added onto that left wing. We'll see if Nylander sticks around for the full season. I would expect him to at the very least. I don't see him being traded at the deadline or anything, but looking at this lineup, the top 6 is deadly. That bottom 6 has great weapons like Yarncroc, like Knies. Players like Sam Lafferty can put in some short-handed goals and plays like that. To me, I look at this forward group, and I don't know if it's the best, but it's up there. It's definitely top 5, maybe top 3. I give it an A+. Just so many weapons, so many versatile players all throughout. On to that defense though, and this is where it gets interesting for me, because you got players like Morgan Riley and John Klingberg who are absolutely defensive black holes, but then you got players like Brody and McCabe who have the talent to be able to pair with them and maybe do decently. But I feel like for the defense, there's a couple of blemishes, again, a couple of players that just have no defensive game that you kind of need to work around. You need to almost have to make up for it. And to me, I think the defense will be solid. I think offensively, it'll be pretty good with Klingberg and Riley leading the way, but I give the defense as a whole a straight B. Now on to the goaltending, which to me is pretty underrated with what Samsonov showed last year, at least when healthy. Regular season-wise, he was fantastic, and Joseph Woll has shown some amazing things too. Obviously, not the biggest sample size, but I do have the belief that he'll at least be an amazing backup in the NHL, could even be maybe a fringe starter someday. But with Samsonov, with Woll, these are 2 young goaltenders that have shown some great promise, and recently some great stats to back it up too. I give the goaltending tandem a straight B as well. When we look at the biggest question mark here though, for me, it's about those 1-year deals. Is this a year where the Leafs are going for it? Is this a year where they're going to be loading up as well at the trade deadline? That's to me the biggest thing. But considering William Nylander's 1-year deal, to me, that's one of the biggest question marks here. Are they going to be extending him? Are they going to be signing him long term, or is he going to be going to free agency? Because I think that affects the Leafs' future a lot. William Nylander is so good, so slick, and has been so good for so long on this Leafs roster, and I feel like losing him would be a huge loss. Even though they do have some players coming up still, Nylander being gone would be devastating. And to me, that's still the Leafs' priority, is making sure they can somehow re-sign this player, even if his ask is insane. He's William Nylander. He has shown so many good things, but that distraction could come into play throughout the year. And that's my only real question mark is, does that end up defeating them in the end? Still though, this Leafs team is going to be fantastic in the regular season, and I think with how wide open that Atlantic division is, if the goaltending holds, I think this is going to be one of the stronger teams in the regular season. I see them getting 110 to 113 points, first in that Atlantic division, and kind of running away with it. I see maybe Boston, Florida, Tampa, Ottawa being in the mix for those 2nd to 5th spots. The division should be theirs, and unless Boston pulls a miraculous feat out of their bag of tricks, Toronto should likely win the division, and hopefully will be in a good spot come playoff time. Let us know down below, where do you guys see the Leafs finishing this next year in the Atlantic? How far do you see them going in the playoffs with this roster? Could we see some trade deadline deals as well? What do you think the Leafs should do with William Nylander? Should it be a trade? Should they just let his contract expire? Should they re-sign him? Let us know all your thoughts down below. Of course, make sure you hit that like button, subscribe, hit that notification bell if you haven't already, if you're enjoying the previous 32 teams in 32 days, and we'll see you for the next one. Have a great day, and goodbye.